In March 2020, Julia Hartz got on a company-wide video call and told 500 people they no longer had jobs. She was crying. She didn't hide it. Eventbrite had just lost 90% of its revenue in a matter of days. Not a bad quarter, not a slow year. 90% gone, because every live event on the planet had been cancelled simultaneously. The company that existed specifically to bring humans together in rooms had just been told by order of every government on Earth that humans could no longer be in rooms. She forfeited her entire salary, $390,000, just stopped taking it. Then she got back to work. 18 months later, Eventbrite was recovering. 2 years later, it was processing $3 billion in gross ticket sales. The company she and her husband had built in a windowless phone closet with their own money that every venture capitalist in Silicon Valley had turned away, had survived the most direct hit any company could absorb. This is how two people bet their relationship, their savings, and 14 years of their lives on a belief most people thought was too simple to be worth building. If you're new here, we cover stories like this every week. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Kevin Hartz grew up in the East Bay and studied at Stanford. He was not supposed to be remarkable, but in the mid-90s, Kevin took a job at Silicon Graphics, one of the companies at the exact frontier of what computers could do. And he saw something there that almost nobody else saw yet. He watched the internet being built in real time and understood, years before, the hype that it was going to move offline industries entirely online. Not some of them, all of them. He acted on it early. In 2001, he co-founded Zoom, one of the first platforms to let people send money internationally over the internet, a direct challenge to Western Union. By the time PayPal acquired Zoom in 2015, it was worth over $1 billion. But by then, Kevin had already moved on to the next idea. And the next idea had walked into his life in 2003. Her name was Julia. Julia Hartz had a career most people would kill for. She had started working at 14, pouring coffee, driving kids to after-school activities, and never slowed down. By the time she graduated from Pepperdine University, she had already interned at MTV and on the set of Friends. She went straight from college into a job developing television programming, not as a runner, as a real participant. She worked on Jackass, she worked on The Shield, she was climbing fast at FX on her way to becoming a proper executive in Hollywood at an age when most people are still figuring out their first job. Then she met Kevin. Kevin was an early investor in PayPal. He understood on an almost physical level that the internet was changing every industry that touched human behavior. He was watching it happen, and he kept telling Julia, television is next, the way people consume content is about to be transformed completely. You can see it coming and stay, or you can get out ahead of it. It took a few years, but she listened. They got engaged in April 2005. 9 months later, they started Eventbrite. 5 months after that, they got married. The idea was simple to the point of being obvious, which is exactly why nobody had done it well. In 2006, if you wanted to sell tickets to an event, you had two choices. You could use one of the major ticketing giants, expensive, built exclusively for stadiums and arenas and major acts, completely inaccessible to anyone running anything smaller. Or you could do it yourself, which meant cash at the door, spreadsheets, no shows, chaos. The entire middle of the market, the yoga workshops and comedy nights and tech meetups and burlesque shows and wine tastings and thousands of other things humans gather to do, had nothing. No tool, no platform, no easy way to say, here is a thing happening, here is how you buy a ticket, here is who is coming. Kevin and Julia believed that gap was enormous. Not just large, enormous. And they were going to fill it. They moved into a windowless phone closet in a warehouse in Potrero Hill, San Francisco. They had moved, saw horses and plywood in on a Monday. They had personal savings, they had a prototype. They had each other, which was either an enormous advantage or an enormous risk, depending on how you looked at it. They bootstrapped. For 2 years, they took no outside money. The venture capitalists they pitched didn't get it. The market was too fragmented, they said. The events were too small. There was no obvious TAM, no clean spreadsheet that showed $1 billion outcome at the end of the math. Kevin and Julia didn't believe that, so they kept going. The financial crisis didn't just crash the economy, it crashed confidence. People stopped spending, companies froze. And a bootstrapped ticketing startup that had been growing steadily suddenly had to wonder whether the whole thing was going to fall apart before it ever really started. But something unexpected happened instead. When the economy collapsed and people lost their jobs and their routines and their sense of stability, they looked for community, they looked for connection. They showed up to things, small things, meetups, workshops, skill shares, neighborhood events, the kind of gatherings that didn't cost much to attend, but meant something to the people who went, and those people were using Eventbrite to find them. The company that was built for human togetherness turned out to be nearly recession-proof. The crisis that should have killed them instead revealed something essential about their product. People don't stop gathering. They gather more. By 2010, Eventbrite was processing $200 million in gross ticket sales. They had proven the market. Sequoia came in. Then more capital followed. The windowless phone closet became offices in 10 countries. In 2016, Julia took over as CEO. Kevin stepped back. He trusted her with the company they had built together, not as a handoff, but as a recognition that her skills were exactly what the company needed for the next chapter. She was the one who understood community, who understood what it felt like to be in a room with 100 people who all cared about the same strange specific thing, who could articulate why that mattered. She took Eventbrite public in September 2018. Valuation: $1.76 billion. On the trading floor that day, the president of the NYSE noted that she had checked the archives and couldn't find a photograph of that many women executives on the podium at once. There were also, apparently, more children on the trading floor than anyone could remember seeing. It felt, Julia said, like a second wedding. Then, March 2020, the company that processes tickets to live events watched in real time as every live event on Earth was cancelled. Revenue dropped 90%. They were, as Julia later put it, processing more refunds than income. The core promise of the company, that people gather, had been suspended by law. She got on that video call. 500 people, 45% of the workforce, gone. In one morning, she cried. She raised $375 million in new capital, something that would have been nearly impossible as a private company with a locked valuation. And she cut costs by over $100 million annually. Then she waited. In 2021, events came back. Not slowly, all at once. People who had spent over a year unable to gather came out wanting exactly what Eventbrite had always offered. Connection, community, the specific electricity of being in a room with people who care about the same thing you care about. By 2023, the company was processing over $3 billion in gross ticket sales, annual revenue up nearly 40% year over year. Over 2 billion tickets sold in the company's lifetime. Kevin and Julia Hartz started Eventbrite because they believed that live experiences, the kind where you show up and you're physically present with other humans, were not a niche market. They were fundamental to what people need. They were right about that in 2006. When nobody would give them money, they were right about that in 2008. When the economy collapsed, they were right about it in 2020, when a global pandemic shut every gathering on Earth. And the first thing people did when it lifted was find each other again. A windowless phone closet. 2 people and their own savings. A belief that humans will always show up. 2 billion tickets later, the world agreed. If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe. We cover the founders and decisions that change business every single week. And if you want to go deeper on the stories behind the biggest companies ever built, check out the video on screen right now.